Welcome to the Week 13 Sports Betting Picks video here at FTN Bets, otherwise known as Betting with Benny. Make sure you guys hit the like and subscribe button. This way you're updated whenever we have a new video that drops. And for those watching on the Game Plus Network, welcome into the show. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go through every game. We're going to talk about the opening lines from both DraftKings and FanDuel and see if there's any value. And we're going to start with the Thursday night football game between the Buffalo Bills and the New England Patriots. Buffalo 8-3 on the year, coming off a win over Detroit on Thanksgiving, 28-25. New England 6-5 on the season, coming off a loss on Thanksgiving to the Minnesota Vikings by a score of 33-26. So when I break the numbers down for this game, on a neutral field, I get that Buffalo is probably like a little bit less than a touchdown of a favorite. So I think I got it at -6.5 here. Factoring in the home field advantage for New England, I get Buffalo should be favored by about 4.5 points here. Now, normally we give a little extra boost to teams coming off rest, but both of these teams played on Thursday, so they both have a little bit of extra rest here. So my number is Buffalo -4.5. DraftKings and FanDuel opened this line at -5.5. So I guess there's a slight value on the New England side if you're interested to it. I mean, it's kind of a dead zone there, 4 or 5 points. Like, again, number 3 is a key number. Number 7, even 6, you could kind of argue with teams going for 2 nowadays. But 4 to 5 is really kind of in no man's land there. So even though there's a point of value here, it's not really something that I'd be looking to bet on. So let's move on to the Sunday games now. The first one is going to be the Pittsburgh Steelers taking on the Atlanta Falcons. Pittsburgh 3-7 on the year. They play on Monday Night Football against the Indianapolis Colts. So again, we'll have to see what happens in that Monday Night Football game before we get a definite number on this one. I wouldn't bet on the look-ahead line until that game actually happens. If you guys are interested in the updated information, get over to the Discord and FTN Bets. We actually have a free trial offer right now. So you can get over to ftnbets.com/free and get that free trial offer. You'll see in the Discord whatever the updates are in this game after that Monday Night Football game is played between Pittsburgh and Indianapolis. As for Atlanta, they are 5-7 on the season. They're coming off a loss to the Washington Commanders, 19-13 this weekend. When I break this down, I get Pittsburgh should actually be favored on a neutral field. I would get Pittsburgh -1 on a neutral field, but the game's not in a neutral field. It's in Atlanta. So when you factor in home field advantage, I actually get Atlanta favored by -1. DraftKings and FanDuel have it at -1.5. So pretty close to my number. We're basically on market here. Not really any betting value to take advantage of. Next game, we can talk about the Denver Broncos taking on the Baltimore Ravens. Denver 3-8 on the season, coming off a bad loss to the Carolina Panthers, 23-10, in a game that they were never really in. I mean, they were losing, they were down 2 touchdowns in that game, and, they had a late touchdown to kind of make it interesting, but really they looked horrible in that game overall. As for Baltimore, they are 7-4. They are also coming off a loss to Jacksonville, 28-27. Jacksonville Jaguars were coming off the bye this week. They were at home. I said this was a spot where, I think the spread was under 3 when it opened. And I said I actually like the Jacksonville side of this game. So we cashed the Jacksonville money line last week there. Taking nothing away from Baltimore, they just haven't looked that great. Since they lost Rashad Bateman, they no longer have that downfield threat. This is an offense that's kind of struggling right now to really find their identity. So let's see. When we break this down, Baltimore on a neutral field should be favored by about 5. Factor in home field advantage, I get Baltimore -7. DraftKings and FanDuel opened it a little bit higher at -7.5 there. Again, 7 being a key number. I know why they didn't want to open it at 7. They opened it up at 7.5. I can't lay 7.5 here. I just think that's too many points. I don't mind teasing this down, though. Again, you're getting a home team in Baltimore. It's at 7.5. You can tease it down to 1.5, which means you're getting it through the -7 and the -3, those 2 key numbers right there. So that's really the way I'd look at it. I wouldn't want to bet on this game, take the spread straight up. But I do think this is a very good teaser piece here where you could tease Baltimore down to -1.5. I expect Baltimore to win this game. Again, Denver is just really, really not good. Their defense is solid, so I don't want to say that their team is horrible. It's really the offense that is struggling, and I don't see it getting any better. Let's see. Next game up is the Green Bay Packers taking on the Chicago Bears. Green Bay is 4-7 on the season as of now. They are technically playing, as we do this video, on Monday Night Football. I would have said they're on their way to being 4-8 because they were down 13-0 at the start of that game. And then they had 14 straight points to make it 14-13. And then they just gave up another touchdown to Philly. So it's sometime in the second quarter right now, and it is 20-14 Philly. We'll see how this game ends up. But as of now, This Green Bay team is 4-7, and they are playing at the moment against Philadelphia, so we'll have to see how that works out. The Chicago Bears are 3-9. They are coming off a loss to my New York Jets, 31-10 here. And here's the way I'm going to break this down for you guys, because there's no lines yet on this game because Green Bay is playing right now. And I also think because we don't know what's going to happen with Justin Fields here, which is a big deal for this team. You know, quarterbacks we talk about all the time are one of the things that move the lines the most. And Fields is actually an above average quarterback. Hell, he was the #1 quarterback in fantasy for 3 of the last 4 or 2 of the last 3 weeks, right before he wound up going down with that shoulder injury that kept him out this weekend. So, again, this is a team that would have a big change. They looked horrible against the Jets this weekend. The way I look at this game, if Fields is playing, I would say that, you know, Green Bay deserves to be favored by probably about 3 or 4 points. If Fields doesn't play, I would say Green Bay deserves to be favored by more than 7, probably like 7.5 to 8 points here. So again, we don't know what's going to happen with Fields. We don't know if there's going to be any injuries at the end of this Green Bay game in the second, third, or fourth quarter that could wind up changing things. Really, Aaron Rodgers, maybe Aaron Jones would be the only 2 guys that have a major effect on it. But at the moment, I would say if Fields is playing, it probably deserves to be like minus 3, minus 4. If Fields is not playing, it's probably more like -7, -8. And again, we may not get that information until later on in the week too. So, you know, I wouldn't doubt if we see the books open this up like Green Bay, maybe like -5.5 or something like that. They'll probably try to split the difference between those 2 numbers until we get more information on Fields. So again, there's no lines yet on this game. So this is just kind of my thoughts based on my numbers and based on where I think it should be. So we'll see what it opens up at, and then we'll know whether or not we have any value once this line actually gets posted. Next game up, the Jacksonville Jaguars taking on the Detroit Lions. Jacksonville 4-7 on the year, coming off a really good win against Baltimore, 28-27. You know, again, they were down in that game. They came back at the end. It was back and forth there at the end. Turned into a really good game at the end of Red Zone. For those of you who watch Red Zone on the weekend, that was the game that kept popping up with you know, another update as they went back and forth. So really good football game. Jacksonville was able to get the win there. Good for them. They beat a solid Baltimore team. Detroit is coming off a loss, but again, they didn't play horrible. They lost to Buffalo 20. What was the final score there? I think it was 28-25 was the final score. That was a game on Thursday. So we had to give Detroit a little bit of a bump there because they do have a little bit of extra rest coming into this game. So when I break it down, I get Detroit should be favored by about 2 points. I got it as like a neutral, you know, pick them up if this was on a neutral field. So when you factor in home field advantage, you get Detroit -2. FanDuel has Detroit favored by -1.5. DraftKings has Jacksonville favored by -1. Now, again, when the numbers are down here around the 0, it's not hard to move it to one side or another. So that's not that big a deal. But the fact that both books have a different team favored in this game by 1 point to 1.5 points is very interesting. So again, I think Detroit should be favored by -2. So I agree with the FanDuel number more than the DraftKings number. So DraftKings, we can get Detroit at +1. So Detroit at +1 is probably the way to go. If you want to play money line there, I think it's only like -105. Both of these teams are minus money on the money line. I think I want to say Detroit's like -105 and Jacksonville might be like -113 or something like that. So, you know, anybody sitting there is like, oh, well, let's just bet both sides of the game. Like, yeah, with the juice, you're going to wind up losing money if you bet both sides of the game here. But again, if we think that, you know, again, I think Detroit should be favored because they're at home here. And if I think Detroit should be favored, then I think that there is value taking Detroit +1 here on DraftKings. Stay away from it on FanDuel. Again, though, if you're on the Jacksonville side of this game, you want to be going to FanDuel where you can get Jacksonville at +1.5. I like Detroit, so I'm going to DraftKings to get Detroit at +1 here. Next game up, the Cleveland Browns taking on the Houston Texans. Cleveland is 4-7 on the year. They're coming off a good win over an overrated Tampa Bay team that I keep talking about. 23-17 is what they won that game. They were down 17-10. A couple you know, late scores got them up to 23-17, and they wound up coming away with the victory there. Houston is 1-9-1 on the season. They're coming off another loss. The Miami Dolphins 30-15. They were up 32. Miami was up 30-0. And then at the end of that 30-0, they wound up putting in their second string quarterback. Houston wound up getting 2 late, you know, kind of garbage time touchdowns that don't really matter there to make this look closer than it was. But really, they got blown out early in this game. They were down 30-0. You know, the late touchdowns at least make it look interesting. When I break this game down here, I get Cleveland is better by about a touchdown. Factor in home field advantage for Houston. Again, maybe home field advantage isn't that big for Houston, but it's still in Houston, so I'm still going to give them a little bit for it. When you give them a little bit for it, you get like Cleveland minus like, I don't know, like 5.5 is probably the number. DraftKings and FanDuel have this at -7, so I do think there's a little bit of value on Houston at +7 here. Is it something I'm going to go mortgage the house and make sure I make a big bet on? No, probably not. But, if you're asking me which side of this game do I think is the side you want to be on here, the fact that you're getting the full 7 points here with Houston, I think is something worth taking. If it was any less than 7, like if this drops to 6.5 during the week, I wouldn't touch it. But the full 7 here, I do think is at least worth the wager on the Houston Texans side of this game. Next game up, my New York Jets taking on the Minnesota Vikings. Jets 7-4 on the season. Good win over Chicago, 31-10 this weekend. The Mike White era here with Zach Wilson getting benched. Interesting enough, I actually did adjust the Jets upwards. Not so much because I love Mike White. It's more an anti-Zach Wilson thing. I don't think people even realize how bad a quarterback Zach Wilson has been for the Jets this year. And I think just putting a somewhat below league average Mike White in there, who was better than Zach Wilson, made the Jets offense look really, really good this week, which kind of just goes to show you how good the rest of the pieces around him kind of were and how bad Zach Wilson actually played. Let's see. Minnesota played on Thursday. They had the win over New England, 33-26. They are 9-2 now on the year. Gave them a little bit of an extra bump here because they have a little bit of extra rest. And honestly, I think there's a lot of value here on Minnesota. I got Minnesota 3 points better than the Jets. With the extra rest, I made it 4. When you add in home field advantage, I get it should be more like Minnesota -6. DraftKings and FanDuel both have this game and Minnesota -3. And again, I'm a Jets fan, guys, and I just don't think that's enough points here. So I think there's a lot of value. I have no problem laying the -3 right now with Minnesota. I thought this should have been closer to 5.5 or 6 points. So I think we got at least 2 or 3 points of value here. It sucks. I am not going to bet it because I don't want to root against my team. But for the rest of you out there who are not Jet fans, the side of this game you want to be on is definitely the Minnesota Vikings. So lay the 3 points with the Vikings. I think that's a really good bet this week. It was the biggest edge that I have on my numbers versus what the books had opened at. Next up, the Washington Commanders taking on the New York Giants. Washington 7-5 on the year, coming off a win over Atlanta 19-13. The New York Giants, they played on Thursday. They lost to Dallas 28-20. But they do get a +1 from me for getting that extra rest in this game. When I break this all down here, so here's the way that it breaks down for me. I get the Giants on a neutral field. They're probably about 1.5 to 2 points better. They're playing at home, so you factor that in as well. So that gets me up to Giants minus like 3.5, -4. FanDuel and DraftKings have the Commanders, the Washington Commanders favored in this game. I don't get that. I mean, like I said, I have it as the Giants more than a field goal here. Again, the Giants are at, unless I watched this wrong, unless I did this wrong, the Giants are at home here. So that would mean that the books are thinking that on a neutral field, the Washington Commanders are better than the New York Giants. I don't know if I can go that route right there. So I think there's a lot of value on the Giants side here. The Giants on FanDuel is +112 on the money line. So that's the way that I would like to play this. Because like I said, I think the wrong team is favored. I don't get how the Washington Commanders are favored in this game. I know that the Washington Commanders have been good. I know that they've looked really good. I've been one of the biggest Taylor Heineke fans and said, hey, I like them better with Heineke than I did with, Carson Wentz. And I even adjusted the numbers up, earlier than most people did. I still just don't get this number here. So let's go to the next game here. The last game in the 1 o'clock window is the Tennessee Titans at 7-4, taking on the Philadelphia Eagles at 9-1. Now, again, the Eagles are playing on Sunday Night Football against Green Bay right now, so there are no lines yet on this game. Tennessee, though, they are coming off a loss to Cincinnati, 20-16. That's not a bad loss. Cincinnati is a very good football team here, so I don't really think that that's anything for the Titans to be that upset about. When I break this down here, I get the Eagles should be favored on a neutral field. I would get the Eagles favored by about 3 or 4 points. Factor in home field advantage. I get Eagles -5.5 is the number that I'm looking at here. And remember, there is no line yet on this game. So if you guys want the line, make sure to get over to FTN Bets. Once we have a line on this game, then we'll be able to talk about it a little more. So there you go. That's going to wrap it up for the 1 o'clock games that we have here. We're going to take a quick commercial break and be right back to talk about the 4 o'clock games, the Sunday Night Football game, and the Monday Night Football game here on Betting with Benny. Welcome back to the Week 13 Sports Betting Picks video here at FTN Bets, otherwise known as Betting with Benny. We talked about all the 1 o'clock games in the opening, and now we're going to go to the 4 o'clock games, the first one being the Seattle Seahawks taking on the Los Angeles Rams. Seattle is 6-5 on the year, coming off a loss to Las Vegas, 40-34, in a very high-scoring, very entertaining game that they ended up on the wrong side of. They played well, though. I mean, nothing wrong with that. You know, that's fine by me. The Rams, 3-8 on the year. They're coming off a loss to Kansas City, 26-10, in a game that everybody kind of expected them to lose here. You know, I think it's interesting, right? Because the Rams are a team right now that you have to make a lot of adjustments for. There's no Matthew Stafford. There's no Cooper Kupp. And that's worth a lot to this team. Their starting running back all year was Darrell Henderson, who they decided to cut last week as well. So, you know, you really are looking at a team that, you know, right now is in a lot of turmoil. So, again, I made them on a neutral field. I would think that the Rams are about 6 points worse than Seattle right now. Seattle being a team that I think is playing pretty well, that I like. The Rams being a team I think is on the downside, although this is one of the numbers I'm not really sure of because I don't know how much I should downgrade them for not having Stafford and not having Kupp. I mean, I keep making adjustments to them and they keep losing by even more than the adjustment I made. So maybe I'm not adjusting them enough here. I haven't really found that right level with them. And I adjusted them downwards again for this game. So when I adjusted them downwards, I actually got that Seattle should be favored by 4 points on the road here. DraftKings and FanDuel have it at -4.5. So I'm pretty much on market, right? Like there's not really a lot of value there. So I guess they're adjusting them slightly more than I did if they got it at -4.5. But, you know, again, I'm pretty confident that my number is kind of on with what, you know, most of the markets and most of the other bookmakers and most of the other bettors are kind of thinking too. So no value here for me on that game. The next one, a game I'm really looking forward to, probably one of the games of the week, if not the game of the week for Week 13. Miami Dolphins taking on the San Francisco 49ers. The Dolphins are 8-3, coming off that win against Houston, 30-15. Again, they didn't even have the starters in at the end of that game, so they were up 30-0. They absolutely dominated Houston when when it really mattered. They could have won by more if they really wanted to. San Francisco beat New Orleans 13-0. Now, again, the offense didn't put up massive numbers here, but the defense, which is scary to say because that offense, as we talk about all the time, they have weapons galore all over the field. So the fact that they were able to win this game 13-0 and basically lean on their defense in this game just kind of shows you how versatile the San Francisco team is. They are 7-4 on the year. On a neutral field, I get San Francisco about 2 points better. Factor in the home field advantage, I get San Francisco -4. DraftKings agrees with me. They have San Francisco -4. FanDuel has it at San Francisco -3.5. So again, we're pretty much on market here. I don't really see any value at all. But I do think this is going to be a very entertaining game. Definitely one I'm looking forward to watching. The next game up is going to be the Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Cincinnati Bengals. The reason I said maybe the best game of the week is because this could also probably wind up being the best game of the week. Kansas City is 9-2 on the year. They're coming off a win over the Los Angeles Rams, 26-10. Pretty easy game for them right there. They never really were in doubt. They were pretty much in control the entire time. We didn't really learn anything new about Kansas City. We know they're a good team. They played a bad Rams team. They wound up winning. That's what you're supposed to do when you're a good team and you play a bad team. On the other side of this game with Cincinnati is 7-4 on the year. Cincinnati did have a very good win. That Tennessee Titans team, whether or not you think they're talented, they play good football. They're very well coached, and they wind up winning a lot of games here. This was not one of those games that they wound up winning. Tennessee winds up losing to Cincinnati 22-16 over the weekend here. When I break this down on a neutral field, I get Kansas City should be about a field goal better than Cincinnati. That means with the game being in Cincinnati, I think Kansas City should be favored by about 1 point. DraftKings has it at -2.5. FanDuel has it all the way up at -3. So that's where I really want to concentrate here. FanDuel, you could get a +3 on Cincinnati over on FanDuel. And I think that's the way that you want to play this game. Like I said, on a neutral field, I get these two teams are, a field goal better. So they're not factoring in any home field advantage based on my numbers here for Cincinnati being at home in this game. And with Cincinnati being at home, it should be less than a field goal. It should be 1, maybe 1.5 here, but not a full 3 points. So if you can get Cincinnati with the protection of the field goal at the +3 right here, I like that a lot. And the other thing I like too, and we talked about this a lot last year, still pretty much the case this year too. Kansas City's defense is not that great. Their offense can score on anybody. But if their offense scores and goes up 10 points, there's a good chance they're going to give up a, touchdown at the end of that game to give us the backdoor cover here as well. So that's why I really like being on the Cincinnati side of this game. Give me the home Cincinnati Bengals +3. I think that's the way that you really want to play this. Next game up, the Los Angeles Chargers taking on the Las Vegas Raiders. On a neutral field, I get the Chargers are about 1.5 points better here. They're 6-5 on the season. They're coming off a win against the Arizona Cardinals. Pretty entertaining game there as well. They won that game 25-24. As for the Raiders also coming off a win in a very entertaining game. They played Seattle. They won that game 42-34 there. Again, the Raiders have not been all that good this year after looking pretty good last year and adding Devontae Adams. They've had some injuries there, but it does look like they're playing a little bit better football right now. Josh Jacobs, monster game. I think he had 33 carries for like 229 yards in that game last week. Now he's taking on a Chargers team that you can run against. So it'd be interesting to see, if they keep feeding Josh Jacobs, which I kind of think they will here. And honestly, that's part of the reason why I got my number. Like I said, I think the Chargers on a neutral field are about 1.5 points better. When you factor in home field advantage, I get the Las Vegas Raiders should be slightly favored in this game by 0.5 points. The books, DraftKings, and FanDuel both have the Chargers favored by 2.5 points. So they didn't want to bring it up to that full 3. And this is something I tell people all the time. If the books won't bring it up to that full 3, they're not bringing it up to that full 3 because they know if they give you the protection of the field goal, everybody's going to be on the Raiders side. And that's why the bet that I like here, I like the Raiders money line. You can get the Raiders money line here on DraftKings at +125. Like I said, I think the Raiders should be favored by about 0.5 point, which again means it's basically a coin flip. But if you're going to pay me +125 on a coin flip, I'm going to take that every time. So I like the Raiders here on the money line. DraftKings has the better price on the money line here at +125 at the open. That would be the way that I'd be looking at this game. So now let's move to the Sunday night football game between the Indianapolis Colts and the Dallas Cowboys. Indy 4-6-1 on the year. They play on Monday Night Football against the Pittsburgh Steelers. So again, we're going to have to wait. We're going to have to see what happens there. If you guys need to get the updates, get over to the FTN Bets Discord. We will have updates on that game when they are available. Right now, they're not available, so there's really not much that we could say there. Dallas, they are 8-3 on the year, coming off a win over the New York Giants, 28-20. That was on Thanksgiving, so we give them a little bit of a bump up as well for having some extra rest. When we do that, I get on a neutral field. Dallas should be favored by about 8 points, add in the home field advantage. I get Dallas should be favored by 10. FanDuel has it at 9.5. DraftKings has it at -9. So, I guess we're pretty much on market here at -10. Is there a little bit of value? Yeah. Do I really want to bet on the Indianapolis side, though? No, I don't. Not in a game where I think Dallas should be favored by 10. Actually, you would be betting on the Dallas side here because it's only 9 and I have it on -10. I think the best thing to do with this game is to tease it down. I don't think it's going to drop below 10 or below 9 or 9.5. If you can get it on DraftKings at -9, you can tease it down to -3. And DraftKings does allow you to push on teasers. So that would probably be the best thing I would say here. I would tease this down to -3. Take the Dallas side here. Like I said, I think Dallas should be favored by about 10 points in this game. And that brings us to our last game, the Monday Night Football game here. As you guys can see, I'm struggling through this after standing in the rain for 3 hours watching the Jets and my boy Mike White actually get the W here on the weekend. So definitely going to be sick this week, but I definitely had to make sure I got this video out for you guys. And we got one final game to talk about. It's the New Orleans Saints taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here. New Orleans 4-8 on the year, coming off a loss to San Francisco, 13-0. They couldn't get anything going offensively. Tampa Bay's defense is good. Are they San Francisco good? Probably not, but they're a pretty good defense too. So I wouldn't be expecting a ton of upside here for the New Orleans offense. As for Tampa Bay, they're 5-6 on the year. Again, I think this team is just overrated. They're under 500 this year. They lost to the Cleveland Browns last week, a team that not anybody thinks is all that great. They will be getting Deshaun Watson back this week, but they lost to the Jacoby Brissett Cleveland Browns, and Jacoby Brissett's probably final game as a starter here. Honestly, I think Tampa Bay this is a team that I have probably been lower on than the market all season long, and so far it's worked out pretty well for us most of those weeks being lower on Tampa Bay. And I'm lower on Tampa Bay again this week. So I get Tampa Bay should be favored by maybe a point to a point and a half on a neutral field, factor in home field advantage, -3, -3.5 at the most. The number on DraftKings and FanDuel is -5.5. So we got at least 2 points of value on the New Orleans side here. I'm telling you guys, like, again, I don't think New Orleans is a very good team this year either. So don't get me wrong when I say that, but Tampa doesn't score. Like, people think Tampa's this like great offense because they have Tom Brady and they have, Chris Godwin and they have Mike Evans and they have all these big names, but they just haven't been scoring. They've been playing in low scoring games this year. They've really been relying on the defense, kind of limiting people from scoring 30 points, but they're not scoring 25, 30 points a game either. So, they wind up playing these like 21-18, 20-17, 23-17 kind of games where, you don't want to ever lay a big number with Tampa Bay. If Tampa Bay's like -1.5, -2, then we could talk. But at -5.5, this is just not a team that's blowing people out. So I think the value is on the New Orleans side. I like New Orleans +5.5. And there you go. That's going to wrap it up for our Week 13 sports betting picks video. Remember, you guys can get over to FTN Bets right now. Check out that free trial, www.ftnbets.com/free. Use promo code Benny. You can save 20% off on any package that you want. That works on FTN Bets if you're looking to get the betting information like my fellow DGens. It works on FTN Daily if you're looking for DraftKings FanDuel information. Also works on FTN Fantasy if you're getting ready for your fantasy football playoffs and you want to see what guys you should be picking up on waivers, what guys you should be starting, what guys you should be sitting. The FTN Fantasy team does a great job with all that over there. For my producer, my boy Quan, this is Benny Ricciardi signing off for another episode of Betting with Benny. Good luck, everybody.